Um, I had to cook in some really horrible situations. I mean, places where there was no kitchen, or places where there was just a shelf and you had a hot plate, electric hot plate, and that was the kitchen, or with a bowl of water. Mauritius was one of those places where, and the flour that was given to me was, you could have just made sawdust and had the same effect with this flour. It was so bad. In Mauritius, the food at that time was so awful. And the flour they gave me to make chapatis was so terrible. But this had been going on all through Africa. All over Africa, Nairobi, and well, we hadn't gotten down to South Africa yet. So it was a serious problem, all of these places. It was also a problem in India. Before, some of the kitchens were terrible, and we weren't staying in temples all the time. So I had to make chapatis. Now, I'm not Srila Kirti. Srila Kirti is the chapati acharya. Anything chapati he makes, it's perfect. Me, I struggled to make chapatis. Sometimes I could make them not bad. If it was a good flour, if it was a gas stove, and if it was, all the conditions were what they usually are in any temple in the world, I can make a chapati. Not as good as him, but I still could make a chapati. It was acceptable. Now we're in these conditions, which are in battlefield conditions, basically speaking. So Mauritius, the worst possible thing, because we're in some outpost house in the middle of nowhere, and it's just a hot plate. Just one hot plate. That's not even so hot. Flour, that's so bad. You can't do anything with it. And I'm struggling just to make a dough. I'm struggling to make this chapati. And it came out to be like I'm giving Prabhupada pieces of cardboard. Literally. Didn't blow up nothing. It was just cardboard. And so this continued as we went through these horrible places. I couldn't get good flour. I couldn't get a stove. I couldn't get anything. So he was getting very upset, because the Srila Kirti said just this afternoon, he said, for Prabhupada, food meant a good chapati. If you could do a good chapati, everything else was forgiven. If you couldn't do a good... Anyway, so I couldn't get chapatis together. So we finally make it back to Bombay. And I was struggling in Bombay because the stove was, there was no gas pressure. There was no real kitchen there. It was, again, horrible. So I made better chapatis because the dough, the flour was good. I made better chapatis, but they weren't really up to the standard. So then Prabhupada looked at them and he said, but what he had been saying all along, each time, was big brain can't even make a chapati. This was his standard statement. So I bring the chapatis in Bombay, big brain can't even make a chapati. So then I said, Prabhupada, nobody can make a chapati on these stoves. I was talking about the ones all over. I said, nobody, I don't care who they are. I didn't say Srila Kirti, because maybe he could, I don't know. I don't care who they are, nobody can make chapati on these stoves. He said, nobody? He's sitting at his table. Nobody? I said, nobody. He said, nobody? Then he pushes his hands up, gets up off the table, walks into the kitchen. And I'm like, whoa. Then he says, where's the dough? And I'm sitting behind him. We're both on the floor. I'm behind him. He's sitting there in front of the stove. And he's going like this, looking at me. Then he was very good at rolling chapatis. Perfect. Looks at me, puts it on the drying thing there that you make chapati with. He's looking at me, takes it off, puts it on the stove. It doesn't blow up. I smirked. I'm this far away from him, right? So he heard me smirk. I don't know if I can duplicate it exactly, but it was something like, yeah. So then he turns around and looks at me, gets the dough, does it even faster, chucks it on the plate, throws it on the grill. It blows up. He picks it up with the tongs and throws it at my nose. And it bounces off my nose. And he stands up triumphant and walks out of the kitchen. And I'm sitting there hysterically laughing. It was the greatest thing that ever happened. It was just spectacular. Get a chapati bouncing off your nose.